call the special meeting for Akron City Council to order. Clerk will read the roll.
Baylor.
Aye.
Connor.
Aye.
Freeman.
Aye.
Fusco.
Aye.
Kamer.
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Omobian.
Aye.
Samples.
Aye.
Somerville.
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
All members are present.
Yeah, I can't.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. At this time, we're going to ask for a motion to suspend all council rules that require us to do in-person voting. If we can get a motion by Councilman Fusco.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we resolve with the in-person previous meeting motion.
Okay, thank you so much. Can we get a second by Councilman Malik?
Second.
Roll call.
Baylor.
Aye.
Connor.
Aye.
Freeman.
Aye.
Fusco.
Aye.
Kamer.
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Omobian.
Aye.
Samples.
Sorry. Aye. I just
Thank you.
vanished. I don't know where I went to.
Somerville.
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
Thank you so much. And if we can at this time, just get a motion to approve the minutes from our previously held meeting. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of the previously held meeting.
Can we get a second by Councilwoman Connor? Councilwoman Connor.
I'm sorry. Second.
Thank you so much. We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Baylor. I think you're muted. Still muted.
Aye.
Thank you. Connor.
Aye.
Freeman.
Aye.
Fusco.
Aye.
Kamer.
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Malik. Neal.
Aye.
Omobian. Omobian.
Aye.
Samples.
Aye.
Somerville.
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
The minutes pass 13-0.
Thank you so much. We have no items on the consent agenda, so we will move into old business, planning and economic development. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you, President Somerville. I'd like to request that we take time on items 1 through and including 7.
Time will be granted.
The report of the committee on item number 8 is for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
Thank you so much. Any objections to suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none. Councilman Fusco, do you have any further comment?
Yes, just that this is approving a sale of 787 Ruth Avenue to Sharon Butler. It's a vacant lot, and we recommend approval after talking it over this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. The rules have been suspended and the committee's report is favorable. We're going to ask for a roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 13-0.
Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend favorable on item number 9 as well. The report of the committee is favorable for suspension of the rules on item number 9.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none. Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. This is last week this was introduced, and I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to truly look it over and bring back comment reference. This is the Mo to Own program that Mr. Valley and has been brought into City Council along with the mayor, and this has been a successful program in other cities. And so we'll recommend approval on this item as well. This will take a lot of those vacant lots that we have out there that we're mowing and put those in the hands of the neighbors in these neighborhoods. So we recommend approval this evening.
Okay. Thank you so much. The rules have been suspended and the committee's report is favorable. We're going to do a roll call.
Baylor, you're still muted. Thank you. Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky. This ordinance passes 13-0.
Thank you. Councilman Fusco, what's your pleasure on the rest of the agenda?
The request of committees to file item number 10 that was withdrawn by the petitioner. And with that, we'd like to recommend time on items 11 through and including 13.
Time will be granted.
Thank you. And the report of the committee is favorable on item number 14. This has been on our agenda now for 30 days. This is known as the DORA, I believe. This is the outdoor refreshment areas within our downtown area. Mr. Hardy, Susie Graham, Brian Angeloni, they've all, OID has done a great job putting this program together. They're going to have an official cup. I understand that the police department has been very active in terms of trying to decide the best way to go with this for open containers and kind of like opening up space in our downtown for folks. So with that, we recommend approval this evening.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Is that your pleasure, Councilman Fusco?
Yes, favorable report.
Okay, very good. Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0.
Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thanks. We'd like to file item number 18. This is the petition for the Penske public hearing that was held on May 18th. So we'd like to file that item and then take time on the balance of the agenda.
Very good, time will be granted. We'll now move to public service. Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you, Madam President. We'll be taking time on 1, 5, and 6, and 2, 3, and 4 will be filed.
Thank you so much. Public utilities, apparently that piece actually has been withdrawn. So we will now move into our new legislation. But before we do that, I do know that Mayor Horgan is on the call with us on this evening. He can't stay long, but I just wanted to give him an opportunity. I do believe he wants to bring forth some remarks. Mayor Horgan?
Well, really, if you were going to introduce the resolution first or not, a lot of the credit on it with some of the work I think that we've been trying to do over the last 4 or 5 years, really getting to a point where declaring racism as a public health crisis. And I've talked about this of whether we make data-driven decisions. Well, that's long been true. And many of you have been in that work and in that space. And so when you look at those outcomes that we see on literally a daily basis, thank you for supporting. I know President Somerville and Councilwoman Samples, and many of you have been brought this up before in declaring this, and we're following move across with many big counties and cities across the state and across the country. And if you look at the resolution about what the action plan is, these aren't going to be just words. We want to put together a group of people and how that is structured to really come up with a plan. And I'll throw it over to Tamika real quick, because I know she's been instrumental in drafting the resolution and moving it forward too. If I can, President Somerville, sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't, it's your floor. I didn't want to.
Mayor Horgan and President Somerville and all of council, thank you again tonight. Actually, Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm going to defer to the Commissioner Donna Scota as we declare racism as a public health crisis here in Akron. Commissioner Scota, if you wouldn't mind.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. I feel as though, as health commissioner and as, quite honestly, as a citizen of Summit County, state of Ohio, United States, and the world, that it's time we really start to look at what has happened to this country and where we need to go. COVID-19 peeled back a lot of the layers of the onion that made it pretty clear where we were as a country. And I start with certainly a public health perspective, but I have to tell you that in my experience and all the years I've worked in public health, humans are far more similar than different. If you look at the Human Genome Project, regardless of our skin color, we are all about 99.9% the same. It doesn't matter. We all want the same things. And I can tell you, when I worked in Cuyahoga County, when I worked in Summit County, with families, individuals want to be able to get a job, work, raise their children, have enough food to eat, and be able to contribute. Nobody wakes up in the morning hoping, today I'm going to be a really lousy parent. Today I'm going to be a really lousy citizen. They just don't, that isn't how people operate and live. And so I think we have the opportunity to look at employment, because obviously education is a way out of poverty. And if you can't read by the third grade, you will never be able again to learn, because you have to be able to read to learn after the third grade. And if you can't do that, you'll end up in a low paying job, and minimum wage is what it is, but it isn't enough to live on. And so the living wage right now is about $15 and I think 38 cents. And so if you don't make at least that much an hour, you can't afford an apartment. You can't afford food. You can't afford anything, a car. And often we criticize folks for not having behaviors that we think they should have. Like, why aren't you working out? Why aren't you eating well? You can't afford it. There isn't enough money to go around. So with that, we then look at housing. And if you don't have a place to live that you can afford, and if you can't get a loan to be able to buy something, you won't be able then to get ahead. So as I talk about racism, I cannot help but feel the social determinants of health are a product of racism, but they are also a product of just not being able to treat people fairly and get ahead. Every school district in Ohio should be funded where the children can be successful. We link it to property tax. And we all know that there are areas where the property tax is a lot higher than others. And so it's time to stop thinking in those categorical sort of cubes. And it's time to start thinking about how can we do things differently. Because in this country, if you don't get a good education and you don't get some post-secondary training, you can't get a job. And if you can't get a really good job, or even a job that pays $15 an hour, you then cannot get health insurance. It is very difficult. You have to be at the qualify for Medicaid expansion, or you need to then go to a private, maybe the ACA could help you, but most of it is high deductible. We need access to health care for everyone. People should have access to basic health care. The other thing is, when you look at employment, and one thing that COVID made very clear is that people work in a lot of different places and they piece together jobs. They may work, particularly in long-term care, they may work a half hour, an hour, or a day in this place, and then they go here for 2 days, and then they go somewhere else, trying to piece together a full-time job. But if that one company puts them on full-time, then they have to offer health benefits, which is the right thing to do, but they can't do it because we don't have a way to offer health insurance to people. And then if you look at this health insurance issue, and then individuals feel as though they get disparate care. And in some cases they may, because there is institutional bias that exists within the healthcare system. The other piece that is huge to this is we have incarceration of individuals who are poor, that are Black, that are minorities. You know, any minority group suffers. And I have to tell you, on Sunday, we did some testing for individuals who worked in 8 or 9 factories in Summit County, or meat processing plants or whatever. We did there were 9 or 10 companies. Everybody's birthday was 1/10, was 1/1 of a year. It's because they don't know their real birthday, because they were born in refugee camps. So they don't even know when they were born. And yet they're here and they're working these really hard jobs that benefit all of us. And we should really appreciate what they do for us. So this is particularly sensitive to me since I've worked for so long in the public sector. But I think when we look at past policies that we've created that really just, like we redline districts, we put highways through neighborhoods. There aren't big box grocery stores in poor neighborhoods. When you look at what people have access to, we need to make sure it's fair. And I'm not saying everybody has to live like I want to live. Everybody doesn't, but everybody should have an opportunity to get what they want. And right now we don't have that. And I think we have an opportunity to create a document, but a document's only part of it. What we really should do is put our heads together and think about how can we make it better for everybody? How can we make it easier on families? How young families struggle today because it's hard. Two people have to work, and you can't get a buy on one paycheck. So two parents have to work, they have children. If COVID-19 does nothing else but tell us we need to take care of each other, then it did its job. And I could go on for hours, and I won't because I talk too much, but I'm here to answer questions. We will do everything we can to help the mayor and his office. And Tamika, thank you for all you've done, and all of council. But it is time. It's time to just stop and look at what we can do. Like I said, third grade reading is critical for families, and making sure that young families have what they need to be successful. And just make sure that we can take care of them because they're our future.
Thank you, Commissioner Scota. We really appreciate your comments. President Somerville.
Thank you so much. And again, just want to thank our Health Commissioner, Donna Scota, for joining us. And before we open it up for questions, I know that Mayor Horgan does have another comment.
Thank you. Listen, I don't remember who said it on Saturday. It may have been Councilwoman Amobian or President Somerville. It really comes down to that basic level of how we treat another human being, and that fear that people have put in other minds that because this person is different, then we need to be afraid of them. Well, I don't want this community to live in fear, and there's no doubt in my mind that this will be the heaviest public service lift of your careers to be able to tackle this. But if we're not afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations across the community, and this is in institutions in business and education and right here, then we're not fit to be able to do this. We have to be able to have those and get those out, but also do something about those rates where we see people suffering just because their color of their skin, which is this movement has pushed this. COVID has pushed this. I appreciate your support. Like I said, I know many of you have been in this space for a lot longer than me. And we appreciate the support. And I know we're going to be able to do this as a community. I'm proud of this city and where it's going. I'm proud of your service and that support. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Horgan. So at this time, we will open it up for questions. I do see that Councilwoman Amobian has a comment.
Am I unmuted?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure what you want to do, Madam President. If you want to take this out of order, just go ahead with the legislation, the resolution, and then I'll have comments. It's up to you. But I do want to iterate and reiterate some things. So I'm not sure how you want to do that. You want to do that in order or just do comments now?
Just really at this time, if we have any specific questions for Health Commissioner Donna Scota at this time. And then I think what we will do is we will take the piece out of order. Councilman Swirsky?
No, I'm not done. Please.
Oh, you're not done? Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Now, my comment has more to do with wanting to make sure that first and foremost, we want to absolutely be clear that we want to tackle racism as a public health crisis. And we want to address the needs and concerns of African Americans in this city and county. Because we kind of blur things when we keep talking about minorities and all the other groups. We want to specifically talk about racism in this space of what we need to do, because we have identified for years now that we have not addressed the concerns of African Americans, Black folks in Akron and Summit County. And I think that is what's really critical. And I think once we address the issues of Blacks, all these other minority groups will probably get benefits as well. It's like, lifting boats. If you lift the boats of African Americans, you certainly will lift the boats of other folks. So I want us to keep that in mind, because once we identify and recognize that your color of your skin is one of the driving forces of social determinants of health. It's one of those areas that persistently influences discrimination in all of those areas of healthcare, housing, education, employment, criminal justice, and all of that. So I just want to make sure that we are real clear about where we want to go and what we want to address. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Amobi. And Councilman Sworsky? Councilman Sworsky, you're on mute.
I'll pass. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other specific questions for our health commissioner at this time? Seeing and hearing none, I'm going to ask if we can take actually item number 13 out of order. So I'm going to ask if the clerk will read that in. I think it's fitting at this time.
Item number 13, offered by Mayor Horrigan, President Somerville, Councilwoman Samples. Resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis, urging the mayor to create a special task force to develop a 5-year equity and social justice strategic plan, directing the clerk of council to send copies of this resolution to area leaders, community organizations, and the city's representatives serving in the legislatures of the state of Ohio and the United States, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you so much. Councilwoman Amobian?
Yeah, we discussed this afternoon, Madam President. The committee's report is favorable. We asked for council and mayor as a whole, and we asked for suspension of the rules.
Very good. Any objections on suspension of the rules? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended. Councilwoman Amobi, did you have any other further comments before we open it up?
Just that I just want us to work with all parties in this community, collaborate with everyone. And it appears that the mayor is wanting to invite all leaders and organizations to participate in this health crisis and address it. And I think that's the way we have to go. All of us have to be on board with this in order to make it, to improve the quality of life for those individuals that have been left out. And we know that what we witnessed on May 25th, the murder of George Floyd, has pretty much made this more clear than anything we've ever seen, that we have to work to reduce racism in our society. And those individuals in positions of power, we need to make sure that their power is used well and they're not abusing their authority. So with that, I thank you, Madam President, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And before we open up the floor for questions from council members, I just want to give an opportunity for Tamika Rose just to give comments. She has been working so diligently and so hard to really pull this thing together. So if she could just give us some comments.
Thank you, President Somerville. So just to reiterate Councilman Amobian's sentiments, we know that racism acts on systemic, institutional, and interpersonal levels, all of which operate throughout the time and across generations. And we know that racism, not race, causes disproportionately high rates of homelessness, incarceration, poor education, health outcomes, and economic hardship for African Americans. We know all of this. We know that almost all of the 400 years of Black America's experience under slavery, Jim Crow, and discriminatory public laws and policies, which allowed preferential opportunity to some, while at the same time subjected people of color to hardship and disadvantage in all areas of life. And so what does this really mean? Policing is not the end all be all of racism. That type of unnecessary use of deadly force towards minorities has just recently come to the forefront because too many unarmed humans of African descent have ended up dead before they could come before the court of law. The real racism of which Mayor Horrigan, President Somerville, and Councilman and the rest of council intend to tackle Through this resolution of declaring racism as a public health crisis and creating a special task force to develop a strategic plan that focuses on equity and social justice, will require all segments of the community to buy in and own their recommendations that come from this task force, from unfair housing, predatory lending, to a livable wage and quality education, just to name a few. During the Health and Human Services Subcommittee today, I was asked what the task force will focus on, and I told the committee that that would be up to the community. Within the coming weeks, the mayor's office will announce how the community can inform the work of this task force, and Mayor Horgan and President Somerville will announce the members of this task force within the next couple of weeks. I just wanted to have an opportunity to say that to the general public and to the rest of council. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Tamika Rose, for all your work on this. I also want to give an opportunity for Councilwoman Samples, who's also a sponsor on this piece, to bring forth comments.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to first and foremost thank Tamika Rose for all of her work, her diligent work on this resolution and making sure that it has some substance to it and making sure that it was more than just words on paper. I want us to keep in mind as we think about those individuals that we will appoint to this committee to discuss racism. I want us to be very intentional and that people understand that this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with racism. Racism is a system that's built over 400 years ago. And we now have the opportunity, a much overdue opportunity, to right a lot of the wrongs that have been done, not just in this city, and maybe other places will take what we're doing as a template to start the much needed process in their community. So I want us to make sure that we're being very intentional about why we are doing this and making sure that when we appoint a committee, they understand that this is not just about tackling police brutality. We know that's an issue. It is on all of our hearts every day. Making sure we are attacking housing, the disparity in housing, education, health and social services, especially as it relates to Medicare, making sure people have insurance and making sure that they're able to get to doctors. These are things I think that are really important to the Black community. And I just want to make sure that we do not lose sight of those things when we're appointing people to this committee. And again, Madam President, thank you. Ms. Rose, thank you. Mayor Horgan, thank you for allowing me to lend some of my points to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Samples. We'll now open it up from questions from our council members. So I do see that Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question for Ms. Scota. I do have something for this, but it was actually for Ms. Scota. I don't know if she's still available. I'm looking on my phone, so I can't tell who's all here.
I think she's still on.
Russ, I'm here.
Okay, thank you for your insight. You mentioned policy, and policy is what has helped institutionalize racism. And since we're looking at this as a city, and we be in the legislative body, can you tell, or do you have anything to share from any type of metrics that you're using on the county side to make sure that policy that you institute does not inherently perpetuate the problem that we're trying to resolve? Because when we talk about systematic racism, first, everybody has a different definition, a different level of understanding. So I'm just curious, on the county side, what metrics are you using that perhaps we can adopt to define and decipher racism so that you can make sure that it's not implemented in any future policies that the county may bring about?
Okay, Russ, I appreciate your question. I think what you're getting at in sort of a concise way is there's something called health in all policies, which means you look at, and I believe Akron signed a policy as well as the county, to look at the health implications of any policy changes that you make. But when I say policy, I'm talking about things at the federal and state level that have caused us to like, and even local policies or individual business policies about not lending to African Americans and minorities, or not, or choosing to only fund in certain neighborhoods, or, you know, the Medicaid policies that won't allow a family to stay intact if you have subsidized housing or get benefits. I mean, all of those things that sort of destroy the infrastructure for which all of the non-minority individuals have been able to enjoy. Like I've said before, if you could get a loan or get a credit card, it could help you get ahead. You know, if you have the proper education, if you can think about a future, if you can have hope, you can think about getting ahead. And if somebody tells you and shows you and not manipulates, and I'm glad Tamika brought up predatory lending. If you have somebody who's not trying to make money off of you, it could make a huge difference. So I would think all the policies that we actually implement from here on out should have a health and all policy spin to it to make sure. But I think our fight is bigger. Our fight is at the state and federal level around the way money is structured and the way that they put rules in place for young families that are trying to start out. Like, daycare should be available. Young families should have access to some sort of subsidized education to help them do post-secondary training. So there's any number of things we can change. But I don't know if the county of Summit has come up with specific policies they're changing. But we have a whole list of things, and the metrics that we look at are basically what I think across this country we've looked at. You know, we've looked at individuals who don't have housing, the income disparity. If you don't have a job, you don't have health insurance. If you don't, you know, have access to daycare, you can't work. If you don't have a car, you can't get anywhere. I mean, we look at all of the people who travel more than 30 miles to work every day. There's all sorts of mobility sort of studies. So there's lots of things we can look at, but I think we have to look at just the basics policy of what we have said in the past that has really created, or I shouldn't even say created, but enhanced what we see right now. You can't make money off of people. You should not make money off of somebody else's misery. And unfortunately, we've let a lot of people do that.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilman Neal, does that answer your question?
To some degree, I can reach out to Ms. Skoda afterwards. I have some questions in relation to the legislation, but I'll wait for that.
Okay, that's great, Russ. Just give me a call.
Will do, dear. Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments or questions as it relates to this piece? Okay. Councilman Neal?
Yes, ma'am. I did have some to this piece. And it's picking up where we spoke on this afternoon. And Ms. Rose mentioned it several times. And it's for us as legislators to understand that the very policies that we pass, how they impact citizens in our community. You know, I've said many times that we're talking about structural and institutional racism. And the four pillars of institutional racism are government, the church, commerce, and education. And I think as a city, it would do us well to have metrics that are used. So no matter what circle we are talking in, we have an understanding of how we get to the equation of equitable policy. In this, one of the things that's going to be critical is for us to have an understanding of our city's history, as well as this country's history. There has been legislation brought before this body that dealt with inequities, and a lot of the inequity is because it's been built up. Racism was constructed for a certain class to maintain power. And anytime you want to deal with that, it becomes a threat. So in this city, when we want to look at racism and its impact on our community, I mean, we've tried to have discussions about historical facts like Columbus Day. We've talked about how the adverse impact of moving the primary, those weren't political things, those are facts. So I'm just hoping that as we move to deal with the inner belt area where the Black community was moved, that we can have honest discussion about how to restore that community. I'm hoping that as we go through in all of our different committees, we should have time to analyze our inequitable policies. Again, things that we bring forth with good intentions, but have adverse impact on folks in our community. So I'm hoping that we understand we don't have to wait for money to come in. But right now, where we are, by every piece of policy and legislation that comes in, we can measure it to see how it impacts our community so that it doesn't adversely impact the community that we're saying that we want to protect, which is the Black community.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other additional comments or questions at this time? Councilman Malik?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Commissioner Skoda and Ms. Rose and Mayor Horgan and Somerville and Councilwoman Samples for all your work on this. I think that this was, a lot of us, our phones have been ringing and our email inboxes have been pinging, and we've been hearing people in the streets marching, and this was the first thing that people asked for, was this recognition of public health crisis, and it will be accompanied by a conversation about how we can remedy it in all sectors. What I also want to make sure is, tonight we're also considering another piece about policing tactics. I want to make sure that we remain focused on what the people are calling for, which is a real sustained look at how we can particularly focus on improved accountability and systemic racism in our police department, right? We all of us have respect for the work that our police officers do and the difficult work that they do, but we have an opportunity to consider so many things that we're starting with tonight. But we can consider a civilian oversight board. We can consider changes to the way force is used, more data and transparency. And I'm just looking forward to all of that work in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions at this time? Councilman Swirsky? Councilman Swirsky, you're on mute.
Okay. We're confronting a historical, lingering evil. We are going to have to be persistent in our efforts, and we are going to have to consider every new idea that is out there for reforming our police department, for creating economic justice, and for, in general, making us a more loving and welcoming community for everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions at this time? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, before we just close, I just want to say again, I just want to thank Councilwoman Samples. I also want to thank Tamika Rose. I want to just thank the mayor again for stepping up and really doing the right thing. Again, us as elected officials, we don't always have all the answers, but again, we want to provide a table where we can bring people, community leaders, and people from the community to come around that table and really help us come up with real ideas of how we can really deal with racism here in the city of Akron. I also do see Councilman Jeff Busco.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, President Somerville. And again, of course, thank you to everyone whose efforts have gone toward this. And maybe an early shout out to all those. There's a lot of work ahead, just a lot of work ahead. And I see we have a 5-year time frame on this. I like that. I like what I'm hearing in terms of developing metrics. All of this is good. And appreciate all the efforts. I would like to recommend that this go in as council as a whole.
Okay. So we do have a motion for council as a whole. Can we get a second by Councilman Swirsky?
Yes, second.
Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This item will pass mayor and council as a whole.
Thank you so much. We will now go back to the beginning of our agenda. Planning and economic development. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you. The report of the committee on item number 1 is favorable with suspension of the rules.
I'm going to read that in.
Oh, silly
No,
me.
that's my fault.
Item number 1, offered by Fusco. Ordinance approving the sale of 521 Lindell Avenue to William A. and Lori R. Corrigan, determining said property is not needed for public use and declaring an emergency.
Okay, now Councilman Fusco.
Thank you. The report of the committee is favorable, and we're asking for suspension of the rules on this item.
Thank you. Any objections on suspension of the rules? Hearing and seeing none, the rules have been suspended. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you. This is selling this property for $1 a square foot at 521 Lindell Avenue to the Corrigan family. Recommend approval this evening.
Okay, thank you so much. So the rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik, Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 2, offered by Fusco. Ordinance approving the sale of city-owned property to Dante DeAndrea and Aaron Baranek, determining said property is not needed for public use and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you, President Somerville. The report of the committee is for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you. This is again for a sale of city-owned property, and it's for the typical price that we sell all property for. Recommend approval.
Thank you. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 3, offered by Fusco. Ordinance approving the sale of city-owned properties pursuant to the city's A Lot for a Little program in order to facilitate the productive reuse of the property and to reduce the cost to the city and the taxpayers in maintaining vacant lots, determining said property is not needed for public use and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco.
Yes, the report of the committee is favorable, and we ask for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, this is additional properties owned by the city of Akron, and we're going to parcel those off to neighbors under the Lot for a Little program. ask for passage this evening.
Okay, thank you so much. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 4, offered by Fusco. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to implement the temporary summer patio program, approving the guidelines for the temporary summer patio program permit, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco.
Yes, report of the committee is favorable, and we're asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Yes, thank you. This afternoon, we heard about this program that was put together by James Hardy, Alyssa Gregg, and Susie Graham. This basically allows in our city, not only downtown, but all over the city, an expedited turnkey operation, whereas a business owner can go online, they can make application, and hopefully within a week, get approval for outside dining, for example, or if it's a bar restaurant, they could serve in an extended area, assuming they would meet the state laws on that piece of it. But it also is available to retail as well. And it's available all over the city. Obviously with COVID, this makes a lot of sense, expanding the footprint for businesses out there. Again, it's very turnkey. They've made it so it's very agile. And this is going to help a lot. And I just got to thank OID, the mayor's office, for coming forward with this one. And we need to pass it tonight so they can implement it beginning tomorrow.
Thank you so much. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 5, offered by Fusco. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into an agreement and grant an easement on city-owned property to the Ohio Department of Transportation to provide access for improvements by the state of Ohio to State Route 422 in Geauga County and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you. The report of the committee is favorable, and we're asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Yes, thank you, President Somerville. This is for a temporary easement on city-owned land for the expansion of State Route 422 in Geauga County for improvements going on State Route 422 from ODOT. So we're recommending approval this evening so they can go forward with that project.
Thank you. The rules have been suspended and the committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 6, offered by Samples. Ordinance ratifying the action of the Director of Public Service without the formality of publicly advertising for bids and entering into a contract or contracts with H.M. Miller Construction Company for the emergency repair of the sewer lining under Waterloo Road and declaring an emergency.
Councilwoman
Thank you.
Samples.
Thank you, Madam President. The report of the committee is favorable, and we are asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Okay. This ordinance is for the repair of a sewer lining under Waterloo Road.
Thank you so much. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky. This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 7, offered by Samples. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into an agreement or agreements and/or legislation with the Ohio Director of Transportation for certain improvements on West Market Street and declaring an emergency.
Councilwoman Samples.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. The report of the committee is favorable, and we are asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
This ordinance is for the improvements on West Market Street between Revere Road and Westgate Circle. And those improvements will be done by the Department of Transportation, Ohio Director of Transportation.
Thank you so much. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 8, offered by Samples. Ordinance determining to proceed with the improvement of US 224 between the termini of Kelly Avenue and Hilbish Avenue by resurfacing and declaring an emergency.
Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you, Madam President. The committee's report is favorable, and we are asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
This ordinance is for improvements of US 224 between Kelly Avenue and Hilbish.
Thank you. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 9, offered by Samples. Resolution declaring it necessary to improve various off-street parking facilities in the Kenmore Business District and Canton Road Business District by sealing, resurfacing and repairing, painting parking space stripes, sweeping, removing snow, cleaning sewer openings, providing lawn, turf, shrub, and tree maintenance, litter and other general cleanup, and otherwise improving and maintaining the same, and all when and where necessary, and declaring an emergency.
Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you, Madam President. As Sarah stated, these improvements are for parking facilities in the Kenmore Business District and the Canton Business District, Canton Road Business District.
And Councilwoman Samples, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam President. Our report is favorable, and we are asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules are suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal, Neal,
Aye.
thank you. Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 10, offered by Samples. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into contracts using Community University Education Purchasing Association bids, Sourcewell bids, Omnia Public Partners public sector bids, or State of Ohio bids, or after publicly advertising for bids, for the purchase and/or lease of various vehicles and equipment and declaring an emergency.
Councilwoman Samples.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. The report of the committee is favorable, and we're asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Thank you, Madam President. As Sarah stated, these is for us to enter into contracts with various agencies after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase of various vehicles and equipment.
Thank you so much. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Sorry, aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0. Item number 11, offered by Councilwoman Samples. Resolution urging the City of Akron Police Department to continue its ongoing policies, procedures, and training which promote officer accountability and instill a greater confidence with the public, urging all state and local law enforcement agencies to adopt similar policies, procedures, and training requirements, and to implement or continue efforts to end police brutality, condemning law enforcement policies that employ chokeholds or knee to neck use of force on an individual as a general practice, and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Kamer.
Thank you, Madam President. The committee's report is favorable. We're asking for suspension of the rules.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to yield to the sponsor, Councilwoman Samples, if she has any comments.
Thank you, Councilman Kamer. Just brief, we spoke about this earlier today in committee and talked about the reason we are where we are right now and making sure that certain things are set into place and that we are requesting that take place within not just our police department, but across the state. A few of those action items are making sure that law enforcement agencies always keep their body cameras on at all times, and making sure that law enforcement agencies should not promote the use of chokeholds or placing a knee on the neck of any individual as a general practice. And with these action items, and I am asking for a passage of this resolution.
Thank you so much. Do we have any comments at this time, Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you, President Somerville. I'd like to thank my colleague, Councilwoman Samples, for this. You know, our Akron Police Department, I'm a big fan and believe that they do a great job. And a couple of years ago, Mayor Horrigan appointed Chief Ball, and I applaud his courage for that. And it's important to notice too that over the last few years, our numbers in terms of use of force has been decreasing, and that's important to note. And I know that Chief Ball and his team, they're not just going to rest and settle. They're going to seek continuous improvement, and I think that bodes well for our city. And I again would like to thank Councilwoman Samples for bringing this in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Fusco. Are there any other comments at this time from any council members? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended. Councilwoman Amobian, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry for taking so long, but I too would like to thank Councilwoman Samples for bringing this, because I think it's very explicit, the kinds of practices we are talking about in this resolution. And it's it's critical that we make sure that everyone is aware that these kinds of things are just, they have no place for human interactions at all. And I truly believe, as the previous speaker indicated, that most of our officers are good, kind-hearted people who got into this business for the right reason. And I know many of them, and I don't believe they would practice these kinds of things. But I don't think it hurts to make it very clear what is unacceptable behavior in enforcing the law. So I certainly appreciate Councilwoman Samples bringing this in. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Mobian, if you can, I know that the sponsor, Councilwoman Samples, is asking for a motion for, I'm assuming, mayor and council as a whole.
I certainly would like to make that motion.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. Can we get a second by Councilwoman Baylor?
Second.
Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This resolution passes mayor and council as a whole, 13-0. Item number 11A, offered by Mayor Horrigan, President Somerville, Fusco, Baylor, and Amobian. Ordinance amending and supplementing Title III Administration, Chapter 35, Employment Policies, Section 35.17, Prohibited Public Safety Practices of the Akron Codified Ordinances, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Councilman Kamer?
Thank you, Madam President. The committee's report is favorable, and we're asking for suspension of the rules on this item.
Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
All right, thank you, Madam President. Obviously, I'll start with you, and I'll yield to you for comments.
Okay, thank you so much. This ordinance addresses putting into our already existing code that police officers have a lawful duty to intervene or report unlawful use of force. At this point, I know that everyone has had the opportunity to view the very terrifying video of the last 8 minutes and 48 seconds of George Floyd's life with a knee in his neck. The most disturbing part about the video is surrounded by officers who are watching, standing by silently. This is an ordinance that is saying when you see something, it is mandatory that you say something. I just want to make it very clear, this ordinance is not an attack on the Akron Police Department. This is not an attempt to discredit the great training that our police officers here in the city of Akron are provided. We work very hard to have an academy so that we can make sure that our officers are properly trained. But this more so has to do with the fact that just as police officers have a lawful duty to perform their jobs, we as legislators, as council members, we also have a lawful duty to perform our jobs. And that is really to make sure that our codes are very clear and to make sure that lawful duties are specified in the codes and that consequences are also clear. That any officer will be criminally liable when they do not intervene or report unlawful use of force. Also in this piece, we also have a piece on here, we don't want any retaliation against officers who step up and they do the right thing, they intervene and they report. It won't be tolerated. So we want to provide some support for them as well. Again, I want to thank Mayor Horrigan. When I came to him with these proposed changes, he was willing to listen. He was willing to add his name and his support. So I want to thank him for that. I also want to just thank our own chief. You know, he shared with us, I think on our very last meeting, you know, what he thought about the video. And he said out of his own mouth that he thought too, what happened was completely unexcusable. And so as council, this ordinance basically puts this down on paper and codifies the fact that we need to have these things in place. So at this time, I'm going to open it up. If there are any other council members that have any additional comments or questions. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you, President Somerville, for your leadership on this important piece of legislation. And just as I believe Ms. Mobian had mentioned, you know, the super majority of our police officers, they go into this for the right reasons. And what this is basically doing is memorializing, you know, expectations and laying it out. I was kind of surprised to hear that that this wasn't spelled out in an ordinance form. So that piece of it is wonderful, and I appreciate again all of your efforts. We're obviously at a tipping point, not only in Akron but throughout the United States. One could say throughout the world, and we're going to have more discussions like this. But I appreciate all my colleagues' support this afternoon. We had heard, and so and asking for a favorable report on this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilman Swirsky.
I'd also like the police to know that all of us here respect and appreciate their efforts. Almost all of the police do not do these kind of things, but we want to make sure it is universally true. We don't want any breach of conduct that embarrasses the police department, that embarrasses the city government. Breathing during an interaction with the police should not be a privilege. It should not be up to the policeman right there to decide whether that is something that the individual they're working with can have or not. We're going to make it law, and we're going to enforce it, and we're going to make sure that everybody knows that the public is watching the police department. The police are the most effective method that Councilwoman Somerville is employing, is having the police be accountable to themselves. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you, Councilman Swirsky. Councilwoman Samples.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I just want to thank you and commend you for your immediate response and action and listening to the cries of the residents, not just in this community, but as we watched for the last 13, 14 days now, people wanting to make sure that our officers are doing their duty and upholding what they swore to do, and that was to protect. And I think that due to your leadership, we as a city council body will be leaders in this. I do expect other councils across the state to want to enact this as well. I've already had a few ask me to send it to them. So I want to commend you on that work. And I'm hoping that we will do this as mayor and council as a whole.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Samples. Councilwoman Amobian.
Yes, I certainly agree with everything that's been said. I like the swiftness of bringing this before the body and getting it codified into law, because, you know, I've heard that the other officers that are complicit in what happened in Minneapolis are using the fact that they were rookies and didn't know any better, or whatever the case may be. I mean, this makes it perfectly clear that if you see something that you know is wrong, that goes against your training and everything that you know to be humane, you need to say something or you're going to be complicit in it. So I think this is critically important. We thank you for bringing it forth.
Thank you so much. Councilwoman Baylor, did I see your hand?
Yes. I too would like to thank you for your leadership and doing this so expeditiously and doing it quickly, because far too long, you know, we have just done things and kind of like, you know, stretched them out for long periods of time, and then they become watered down, and then the effect is either non-effect or it's just diluted. So this was a perfect example, like Councilwoman Samples said, of listening to the people and listening to the country and the cries of the people, and just trying to secure as a leader that it doesn't take place on our watch. you know, we are responsible for the people and the citizens here of Akron. They put us in office to provide them with the best policies and to protect them as much as we possibly can. So I just thank you for this. And I think it's a good thing because it protects law enforcement as well. They may not think of it as that, but it does. It protects them as well. So I just thank you and you and the Councilwoman Samples for her part in this as well, and job well done.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Baylor. Are there any other comments at this time from any other council members? Councilman Freeman?
Hi, President Somerville, thank you so much for this. And some comments I received today, and I just wanted to dispel those comments. Somebody indicated, you know, oh, you do this, and the next thing you do, you're going to try to do this police department, that to the police department, you know, defund the police department. That's not what this is about this evening. This is about saying, you know, someone once told me, people don't do what you expect, they do what you inspect. And really, we're calling on our police officers to watch out for one another, to remind one another. And I don't think that can ever be a bad thing. So, and just kudos to the police department, what they've done. In no way is this, you know, a shout out against them, but obviously there's some things, whether consciously or unconsciously, that are taking place need to be addressed. So thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you so much. Are there any additional comments at this time? If not, I just want to thank all of my colleagues for your support on this piece. I want to tell the residents of Akron, those who showed up to protest, that we not only saw you there, but we actually heard you, and this is a first step. And we know that we have a lot more work to do, and we're prepared to do so. I do believe Councilwoman Samples, you're going to make a motion.
Yes, motion for mayor and council as a whole.
And I think Councilman Fussell, you'll second that motion for us.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0, mayor and council as a whole. Item number 12, offered by Neal and Samples. Ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase of services for the rehabilitation of Elizabeth Park in keeping with the Akron Parks Challenge and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam.
Councilman Neal, you're on mute. Councilman Neal, can you hear us? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, yes. I said the committee's report was favorable and we're asking for a suspension of the rules.
And also, can you bring your video back up? There you go, we can see you. Any objections on suspension of the rules? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Well, I'm not sure there was discussion this afternoon. I'm not sure if Mr. Hardy's here to speak on it or if the councilwoman of the ward would like to speak on it, but it's another successful park challenge event.
Councilwoman Samples, did you have comments?
Yes, I do. I just want to commend the residents of Elizabeth Park and the staff down there for working diligently with the Parks Challenge to come up with a plan that would work for the children in that community. It's long overdue and they will appreciate it. And I want to thank Bridget for all of her hard work and the residents who all came together to design a park the way they wanted it to look. So I commend her for that.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hardy, did you have any additional comments?
No, Madam President.
Okay. Thank you so much. Councilman Neal?
Again, Madam Chair, the committee's request was favorable, and we're asking for suspension of the rules.
Okay, very good. I do see Linda Mobian has a comment.
No, I was taking my hand down. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. Roll call.
Baylor,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer,
Aye.
Lombardo,
Aye.
McKittrick,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Somerville,
Aye.
Swirsky.
Aye.
This ordinance passes 13-0.
Thank you. We will now go to the portion of our meeting that we do refer to as our public comment period. So at this time, I'm going to ask if the clerk will read in our public comments.
This is from Kathleen Bauer. I was raised to believe that police were there to protect everyone in the community. I have since read and had it verified by my lawyer that the main responsibility of police in the US is to find evidence leading to successful prosecution, not find the truth. Based on this and through personal experience in learning in another community, I will never willingly cooperate with the police again. This current responsibility of police leads them to be adversarial to the very people who pay the taxes. Please consider rewriting the mission of the police in our Akron community. This is from Elise and Tessa Gaffney. I am an Akron voter and resident and graduate of the University of Akron. I will not support any candidate in the future that does not address these demands. I demand that our local elected officials begin to invest in the public safety of Black Akronites by investing more into impoverished Black communities and divesting in non-healthy safety practices that have proven not to work, such as over-policing. I demand that state and local lawmakers ensure that the police that are patrolling the Black community are from a similar Black community and or have extensive and intensive cultural competency training, along with implicit bias training. They must also be required to volunteer in the community that they are patrolling at least 10 hours a month. I demand that the deputy mayor, city council, and police chief work with community leaders and Black mental health agencies to develop, provide, and make mandatory mental health training for all APD officers in order to ensure that our mental health population is treated with dignity and respect. I demand that 25% of the police budget goes to prevention programs in the inner city and that asset forfeiture programs be widely publicized to ensure that the folks on the front lines doing the work have the necessary resources to make our community better. I demand that the police auditor be given the necessary tools to investigate properly and discipline rogue police officers, and that a community civilian review board is made up of civilians from each ward and instituted immediately. These tools include, but are not limited to, subpoena power and disciplinary action in order to ensure that the Black community is able to build trust that rogue officers will be disciplined and removed from Black communities where they have done harm. I demand that police be removed from all public schools and replaced with mental health trained community resource personnel. I urge you to listen to Black leaders from the Freedom Bloc and the Akron Minority Council as we move forward. This is from Ginger Reed. Hi, as you're well aware, citizens and communities all across the country and really the world have faced a lot of uncertainty in the last few months due to COVID-19. It's been critical for community-based sites like yours to share information regarding coronavirus, but I don't want anyone to forget about the importance of natural disaster safety. On that note, I'm passing along information that will help protect the people in your community during emergency weather. Tornado Facts and Safety, the ultimate guide to hurricane facts, information and resources, how to survive a flood, flood safety tips, the ultimate home fire safety checklist, tools and safety measures that will keep your family safe, drought safety tips for winter weather emergency, how to prepare, how to survive a prolonged power outage, driving in emergencies and disasters. Is it possible for you to add this list in full or in part, whatever makes the most sense based on your area, to a resources page so that your site viewers have access to it? Stay safe. By the way, I'd also love to write a free research-based article you could share on your site on living a greener life. Please let me know if you're interested. If you'd prefer not to be contacted again, please send me an email and this will be the last time you hear from me. Thanks. This is from John and Kelly Ashley. I'm writing as a resident of Ward 10 and as pastor of Wingfoot Church in Goodyear Heights to express my support for the city's proposal to declare racism a public health emergency. We need this level of seriousness and resources to be able to address the generations of injustices that have affected minorities and people of color in our city. I also want to express my support for the reform measures proposed by the Freedom Bloc and Reverend Pounds of Second Baptist Church. These reforms include the following. State and local lawmakers ensure that the police that are patrolling the Black community are from a similar Black community and/or have intensive and extensive cultural competency training, along with implicit bias training, and have to volunteer in the community that they are patrolling at least 10 hours a month. The deputy mayor, city council, and police chief work with community leaders and Black mental health agencies to develop, provide, and make mandatory mental health training for all APD officers in order to ensure that our mental health population is treated with dignity and respect. 25% of the police budget should go to prevention programs in the inner city, and that asset forfeiture programs, money and property seized from illegal activities, be widely publicized to ensure that the folks on the front lines doing the work have the necessary resources to make our community better. The police auditor be given the necessary tools to investigate properly and discipline rogue police officers, and that a community civilian review board is made up of civilians from each ward and instituted immediately. These tools include, but are not limited to, subpoena power and disciplinary power to ensure that the Black community is able to build trust that rogue officers will be disciplined and removed from Black communities where they have done harm. Police be removed from all public schools and replaced with mental health trained community resource personnel. This is from Richard Morkel to the Akron City Council. Systemic racism is baseless. There is a 25% higher chance as a violent white criminal of being shot by police. In 2019, a total of 9 unarmed Black people were killed by police officers and 19 unarmed white people were killed by police officers. 6% of our population committed 44% of all murders in 2018. A police officer has an 18.5% greater chance of being killed by 13% of the population than the reverse. There are no basis for the Akron City Council to pass a racism as a health risk bill. The subsequent litigation will destroy all chance of harmony, justice, real economy apart from depending on the ever increasing national debt. If we really want a world war, let's keep doing more national debt. Destroying city, state, and our republic by embracing anguish. Systemic racism only exists in the pro-choice culture of abortion from its very start. Consider this, Akron City Council. Thank you. This is from Danielle Render, representative of NOACA. Adopted resolution opposing the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency's proposition to combine the U.S. Census Bureau's Akron, Canton, and Cleveland metropolitan statistical areas, which would effectively eliminate the Akron metropolitan statistical area and declaring an emergency. The Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency, NOACA, respectfully requests that the Akron City Council Planning and Economic Development Committee allow a representative of our organization to speak during the public comment period and/or add to the record that NOACA has never had any intention to dissolve the Akron-Canton MSA, which a resolution was adopted to oppose combining of the metropolitan statistical areas of Akron, Canton, and Cleveland. A study was developed by NOACA to show how our communities would benefit regionally together and bolster opportunities for population and economic growth. We believe that the city of Akron and city of Canton are vibrant cities who share the same goals to strengthen our region. We would like the opportunity to present our extensive research at your next or future committee meeting to discuss our findings, as well as offer insight to the residents of your great community on what can be gained if our communities work together. We would be most appreciative if you allow our perspective to be heard and discussed. Please let me know if a NOACA representative would be able to discuss or make a statement during the public comment period. This is from Steve Bauer. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I write with a heavy heart today. I saw the tragedy of the 4 white policemen killing a Black citizen, as you have, and all of the aftermath since the time. I wish I could say with confidence things will change, yet all of you know that racism is a heart issue. I was a former immigrant in 1956, escaping from communist Hungary with my family. I lived the same communist nightmare that exists today in North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, Syria, Venezuela, and many other totalitarian regimes. There are very few Black people in Hungary in 1956 and very few now. We had a few university students, but that was about it. Really, immigrants were not interested in the Soviet-controlled Eastern European countries. We escaped. Why would anyone want to come in? When we came to America, I sensed that my parents were afraid of Black people or thought we were better than those people. A kid picks this up. We didn't hate Black people, but my dad hated Jewish people. I don't know if it was Hitler's influence on Europe or what. My dad blamed Jewish people for every problem in the world. I wrote on a book and made an ugly face on it, and it read, "I am a Jew." His hate, Dad's, became mine. I never knew any Jewish people. I did not know why. But when I saw the Star of David, it made me very angry. In 1979, I became a believer and tried to be a follower of Jesus Christ. As I tried to live out my newfound faith, God convicted me of my hatred and prejudice. I repented and asked him to forgive me. I sensed he wanted me to move toward Blacks and Jewish people, not just tolerate. I didn't know what that would look like, but I felt the draw. I can't change the world, but I can change me. I had to break the generational pattern of sin, hate, prejudice in my family so my wife and I could raise our children not to be prejudiced. Over many years, I have been able to be friends with a rabbi. We disagree on many things, but we are friends. I have shared my story and also at KSU Holocaust gatherings, Akron U classes, and I support a group called Jews for Jesus. One of my sons married a young lady from Ghana, and I have 2 biracial grandsons. 2 of my daughters dated Black young men when they were in high school. I have had a chance to tell my story at an outreach at Arlington Church of God, Celebrate Recovery, and I've spoken to 4 or 5 Black pastors in the area about my background. It is all that I can bring to this table of racism problems. I can offer my story, my racial history of family beliefs, what we heard growing up as kids. It is the small things I have been led to do. I try to notice people of color, all people, but especially Black. What I mean is I hold a door, smile, get to know some of the local stores or fast food. If I hear of a better job, I tell them because I notice they have good skills. I tell them, young Blacks, that there are many good jobs that don't require college and tell them about training, etc. I also remind them that Kent State, Stark State, and Akron U are all good schools and that are close enough to commute or ride a bus. I guess what I mean by notice is take a personal interest. We can all find little things to do for others. Well, thank you for taking the time to read this. It is long already, but I write it to tell you that I am concerned about declaring racism a health emergency. My fear is that already we have hyped up racism to the point where young Blacks are losing hope in their future. Sadly, racism will always be here. There will always be some who hate a certain group for whatever reason. Yet it seems like every week, every day, I read about systemic racism, racial inequality, white privilege, reparations, and more. It seems many are looking for racism everywhere. I think it makes young Blacks think we, white, are all racist. I read daily about Black leaders who disagree with many other Black leaders about this issue. Conservative Blacks disagree on these points with those who play the race care or race bait or play the victim card. These are not my words, but the words of many Blacks I know, including all of the following: the Coalition of African American Pastors, Bishop E.W. Jackson, Elvita King, Jason Riley, Walter Williams, Larry Elder, Star Parker, Karen Whitsett, Dr. Lara Lee, Charles Payne, Talib Starks, Carol Swain, Condi Rice, Benjamin Watson, Deanna Bass Williams, Josh Nelson, Jay Stevens, Burgess Owens, John Starks, Brandon Tatum, Candace Owens, May Tour, Derek Green, Joe Collins, Jen Elberly Guillory, Kanye West, Colby Covington, TQ Lee, Vernon Jones D'Amiga, Chance the Rapper, Herman Cain, Dee Dee Bass Williams, Anna Polina. These and many more Black leaders have a different story to tell about Black Lives Matter and white privilege, systemic racism, and they say that too many Black leaders continue to promote the victimhood culture. I write this with deep respect to all of you, Black, white, Hispanic. This is a conversation I pray you will have among yourselves. Maybe you do, but the media will not touch the subject. I am not talking about being Democrat, Republican, independent, left, right, liberal, conservative, progressive. I'm talking about the future of young Blacks. I want to see them not only survive, but thrive. I fear they are getting caught up in the politics and that the White House becomes more important than the long-term future of young Blacks who are losing hope. Again, I write with great respect to all of you. I can't have this conversation with people of color. I would gladly do it, but it is a Black on Black conversation that needs to be held right now. I also am forwarding this email to the City Council in Akron. I thank you for your time. And again, I'm writing not to criticize, but to start or continue conversation. The future of all young Blacks is at stake. We can't get this wrong. This is from Judy Hill, the president of the Akron branch NAACP. The Akron NAACP is pleased to support City Council's action to declare racism a public health crisis. Health officials have long acknowledged that systemic racism negatively impacts the mental, social, economic, and educational well-being of those oppressed. The Akron NAACP hopes that this will lead to a scientific, result-oriented approach to policy reform that addresses the disparities created. The CDC defines public health this way. Public health is the science of protecting and improving the health of people in their communities. This work is achieved by promoting healthy lifestyles, researching disease and injury prevention, and detecting, preventing, and responding to infectious disease. The Akron NAACP supports this first step and looks forward to the appropriately funded strategic initiatives designed to combat systemic racism, which is a public health crisis, and eradicate the inequities that divide us. This is from Raymond Green Jr., Executive Director of the Freedom Bloc. The Freedom Bloc stands in support of this initial step in building trust between the community, the police, and the community, eliminating chokeholds, and more importantly, building insulation and protection for those that witness such acts is a great first step. Furthermore, the Freedom Bloc looks at this initial step and is encouraged that this body and the community will be able to sit down and begin real discussions about the demands that the community has set forth for better safety practices in the city of Akron, particularly the Black community. This reform is great, but it is time for a fresh start.
Thank you so much. We want to thank all of those who participated in our public comment period. At this time, we're going to do our committee assignments. Planning and Economic Development, Councilman Fusco.
1 o'clock.
Rules, Councilman Freeman.
2:30.
Parks and Rec, Councilman Neal.
1:45.
Health and Social Services, Councilwoman Amobian.
$2:30, sorry.
Public Service, Councilwoman Samples.
2 p.m.
Budget and Finance, Councilman Freeman.
3 p.m.
Public Safety, Councilman Kamer.
2:15 on June 15th.
Housing and Neighborhood Assistance, Councilman Fusco.
Subject to call.
Public Utilities and Green Committee, Councilman Swirsky.
2:30.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else coming before council? Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you, Madam President. Just brief. I just wanted to make sure that I publicly thank those who was able to come out on Sunday and stand with the other Summit County Black elected officials across the city. Councilman Lombardo, Councilman McKittrick, Councilman Malik, Councilman Fusco, Councilman Swirsky, and of course our mayor, and more importantly, our chief. You know, Akron, to me personally, someone who's lived here for 49 years, we have a different chief than some of these other places. I think we were blessed to get him as our new chief when we were going through a lot of turmoil here in the city. He has a calming disposition and spirit to himself that many of the pastors in this community have uplifted him because they know his heart. And I think it's important that people know that he didn't have to be there. He didn't have to be there, but he was. And I wanted to thank him for that, and thank our other colleagues for coming in and showing up and standing with us in solidarity. It meant a lot. It meant a lot. And I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Samples. Councilman Swirsky.
Yeah, I just want to thank Councilwoman Samples and especially Council President Somerville for listening to the citizens of Akron who've expressed outrage against the acts that have happened around the country. And I want to thank the police department for committing themselves to never have this happen in our city. And I think it's really remarkable that Councilwoman Somerville and Samples have been able to very quickly listen to the concerns of the residents and provide some meaningful legislation that will enact some great changes in behavior. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Swirsky. Anything else coming before council? Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend everybody on the legislation that was passed. Couldn't help but think of how, my grandparents would respond to hearing that racism has been declared as a public health crisis. Couldn't help but think about some who've been fighting in this community, like Mr. Herman Oden and others, how they would respond. But I do want to say, I heard in the public comments about the request for, police to take training. I want to ask us as council and as the administration to stand by our police, and we take training as well. It's difficult for us to understand sometimes legislative policy that we may pass that inadvertently puts a knee on our constituents' neck, be it by high water bills or other taxes where we say, hey, it's just $1 here, $1 there. I think with what's coming down the pipe, as far as where we're going to analyze our past and present policy, it'll be important for us to have an understanding so that we can develop metrics by which to measure our progress and the impact of policy that we bring. I think that'd be a good way for us to stand by our police. And from a legislative side, just to let you know, we're talking about racism being a public health crisis. Let's look at a key piece of legislation that allowed the present president that we have in office to be in office, where its very foundation is based on racism. And that's the Electoral College, where people of African descent were declared 3/5 of a human being. Now that's an easy one for us to look at and see the inequity in that policy. And hopefully as a nation, we'll get back to address something like that. But I mean, locally, there are more, like I said, there's more pressing things that before us that I believe that we can look at. And then lastly, I heard the term defund the police. And I hope we understand that when we say defund the police, we're not against the police. And I'm hoping that we can look at this. When the comment defund the police comes up, it's actually saying, how can we better utilize our police and not have them be involved in what is called a high price tag service call? Many of the calls that the police go on could be handled by social service groups. And when groups look at how to empower disenfranchised communities, they're looking at how can they work collectively with the police by handling some of those what we call service calls, so that the police can focus on the more violent offenses. So I'm hoping at some point we can, along with our police, look at the national discussion about the term they're using is defunding, but the better thing to say is how can we better utilize those resources to empower our communities to be able to work with the police. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Neal. Is there anything else coming before council at this time? Councilman Fusco, you're on mute.
Silly me. Motion to adjourn.
So we have a motion to adjourn. If there's no objections, we are adjourned.
Thanks.
This concludes the live broadcast of Akron City Council. Margot Somerville presiding.